I can see that there are some attendees joining, so we will give them a few seconds to join. I can see the numbers growing. Okay, we can start. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining us from all over the world and from different time zones as well. Thank you for joining the launching event of the Quality Infrastructure for Sustainable Development Index, the story behind the data. My name is Nora De Anang, and I will be acting as the Master of Ceremonies of today's event. And before we start, I'd like to mention some housekeeping rules for this event. The entire event will be interpreted into 3 languages, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. At the bottom of your screen, simply click on the interpretation button and select your language of choice. There is also a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, so please send us your questions and comments, and we will do our very, very best to answer them, given that we have quite a packed program for today. But if we don't answer them during the session, we will compile them and share the responses with you on the UNIDO Knowledge Hub. And this session will also be recorded, and we will make the recording available to you after the event, also on the UNIDO Knowledge Hub. So today's event is in 2 parts. First, we will introduce the Quality Infrastructure for Sustainable Development Index, in particular, its background and its development. And the second part will be a panel discussion with the International Network on Quality Infrastructure Organization representatives from ISO, the IEC, OIML, BIPM, and IAF, who actively contributed to the key inputs and provided insights to the index development. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to today's experts and speakers. We have Ms. Monica Rubiolo, Head of Trade Promotion at SECO, Mr. Bernardo Calzadia Sarmiento, Managing Director of the Directorate of Digitalization, Technology, and Agribusiness at UNIDO, Mr. Emanuele Riva, the Chair of INetQI, Ms. Hedvig Norlin, Independent Expert in Composite Indicators and Scoreboards, Mr. David Hanlon, Conformity Assessment Board Secretary at the IEC, Mr. Jose Alcorta, Head of Standards Development at ISO, Mr. Chingiz Kranvayev, International Liaison Officer at BIPM, Mr. Ian Dunmill, Assistant Director at OIML, and last but not least, Mr. Brahim Hula, Communications and Marketing Committee Chair at the IAF. And with that, I would like to share some opening remarks from Ms. Monica Rubiolo on behalf of SECO. Unfortunately, she was unable to join us live today, but was very kind to share some video remarks. So here they are.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here, even if only virtually, joining this launch event for the Quality Infrastructure for Sustainable Development Index. I'm the head of trade promotion with the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, and it's for me a real pleasure to be part of this initiative, which is belongs to the long-standing cooperation with UNIDO. So we know all that global trade is increasingly governed by standards and quality requirements. Without sufficient quality infrastructure in place, such standards and requirements, even if based on legitimate aims, can become important barriers to trade, and it's important that we tackle them. SECO and UNIDO have been partnering for more than 15 years, and we highly appreciate UNIDO's unique expertise in the field of quality standards. This is really one of what we consider core competence areas of UNIDO. So we think that enhancing the ability of developing countries, firms to participate in trade and access markets together with UNIDO is an important goal. And this is the reason why we have set up together the Global Quality Standards Program, which is called GQSP. Indeed, the Joint Global Quality Standard Program is a flagship of SECO trade promotion, and we are very glad to be part of this initiative. As part of the GQSP, we have build up this knowledge hub is a programmatic approach that allows, additionally to country interventions, to strengthen the quality and standards compliance capacity overall. So this global component allows us to increase the instruments, the knowledge related to strengthening quality infrastructure, and it's really a core part of this program, publicly available and hosted in a platform by UNIDO. The development and subsequent application of the global tools that we have been developing in this knowledge hub, the sharing of best practices and synergies, and generating knowledge that is applicable across all countries are for us crucial elements of this program. GQSP aims to assume through the leadership and coordination and exchange with global partners, such as the INetQI members. And let me assure you that this is really one important feature of the program, that we are able to draw upon the knowledge that is being generated by this knowledge hub. Today, with the launch of the Quality Infrastructure for Sustainable Development Index, we consider that we are making a major step. It's really a very important tool that provides a global public good for the benefit of everyone. The idea and the aim is that the QI for Sustainable Development is universally applicable, provides key information and knowledge to a wide range of stakeholders, and its impact reaches beyond the GQSP participating countries. The index presents a first international and coordinated initiative that links the topics of quality infrastructure with the aspects of sustainable development. I believe it is clear to all of us, all of you participating virtually, that development must be sustainable and trade must be sustainable. At SECO, we are convinced that the standards can play an important role to make trade and development more sustainable. But we need the quality infrastructure that provides the necessary services to achieve this aim and make sure that the standards become a barrier to trade. With this new Quality Infrastructure for Sustainable Development Index, we have a tool that provides this initial diagnostic intelligence. It gives us the information, the maturity and fitness of the quality infrastructure to meet the country's sustainable development needs. It will show the importance of investing in quality infrastructure. And we know that also with the experience of Switzerland is nothing too obvious, just because quality infrastructure is across many sectors, but it's very difficult to identify it and to single out as a specific part of the system. But for us to be able to consume, to trade, to export, to import products that complies with the requirements, is important that this quality infrastructure is available. So we all support the processes and national implementation plans for achieving the SDGs, and we think that this index will be a very important component in this endeavor. So let me conclude by saying that launching this index marks for us really a milestone in our joint work, and is a very clear result of the good collaboration with many of you. I would like to take the occasion to thank all of you who have contributed to the creation of this new index. I know that there are many people behind the scenes that have been working very hard over the past years to make this index possible. And so I would like to share this knowledge with you, the data, and I hope that you all will be able in the future to make use of this index, to make use of all the other tools that are being available the knowledge have. So thank you very much, and all the best in the use and discussion of this index.
Indeed, as Monica said, there was a lot of collaboration during the development of this index, and in gathering here alongside this launch, the collaboration is something worth celebrating today. So now I'd like to hand over to Mr. Bernardo Calzadilla Sarmiento to speak on behalf of UNIDO. Bernardo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Because I'm live, I'm not in the video. So very happy that SECO, Ms. Rubiolo, could make it to provide such a nice introduction. I will have less to say. I'm very pleased today to be here. As Monica said, it is a milestone that we are achieving. We had a milestone only last week, 2 weeks ago, when we launched the standards compliant analytics at the WTO. And now it is a very important milestone of this important program that we are promoting with SECO support. And you know, UNIDO has been supporting the member state to increase competitiveness to quality compliance, but in particular in establishing the quality infrastructure institutions. So after 40 years that we are in business, it's very important to see how we can further contribute. And this tool will give us the possibility to identify gaps and continue supporting the endeavor of the countries to build their sustainability based on this. Following a very systematic approach based on market needs, UNIDO delivers the support to programs, and GQSP is indeed a flagship program because it looks at the policy at the macro, at the meso and micro level. So we work with the institutions, we work with the companies, and we work with the policymakers. But partnerships are also very important in this end, and certainly a distinctive example in the QI area is the collaboration and cooperation with the International Network on Quality Infrastructure, INetQI. Somehow it has been part of the process. The first result that we yielded together in 2017 already, after long discussions, was to have a common definition of what is quality infrastructure. Afterwards, we also started a different adventure, is to have guiding principles, really the meta principles, how to guide quality policy. And we pushed, and we had a new wave of quality policies. And this was another milestone of the collaboration with INetQI, and the importance that we need to look at quality infrastructure development in a more holistic manner, including the regulation to the policy, to the institution, back up to the level of the enterprises and the consumers, but also as an integral part of the triple bottom line. Until then, people, planet, prosperity was very much something that is in the future. QI was related to trade and economic development. But also we launched the laboratory policy document promoting good governance in laboratory development. We have also recognizing the important megatrends of digitalization, developed several publications on quality infrastructure. We recently launched a document on remote conformity assessment. All of this wouldn't have been possible without the support of SECO. So this is the opportunity to give a big thanks to SECO for this support, for this collaboration. It is a joint venture to support trade capacity building in developing countries. And building on the successful trajectory, we are launching today the QI4 Development Index, which is a major milestone to support the countries to get back on track in the agenda for sustainable development. The index wouldn't have been possible with INetQI. I mentioned it already, but I would like still to highlight the contribution of ISO, BIPM, OEML, ILAC, EIF, IEC, ITU, UNEC, and IQNet and IIOC, who have done a particular additional effort. Some of the colleagues are here with us. Thank you so much. Also, it was mentioned by Monica, the quality index is a public good for common use, and we really hope that we will help to have the opportunity to measure. And you cannot improve what you don't measure. We cannot see if a country's quality infrastructure is fit for purpose if we don't measure. And this will be just another tool to have this possibility. It should enable key actors to hold policy discussion, make better decisions to lead to the strengthening of the quality infrastructure in relation to the SDGs, to have more coordination with technical cooperation, but with all cooperating partners. Finally, I would like to express my very sincere appreciation to all the team, to all those who have been behind the development of the index. Special thanks to Juan Pablo and the team here at UNIDO, but also Juan Pablo Davila, and also the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, who with Ms. Norland have provided us this strong methodological support. You will hear about this. So I wish that the QI for Sustainable Development Index is a great success, but in particular to help the countries to improve their QI system to achieve the SDGs. Thank you for your attention. Back to you, Nora.
Thank you very much, Bernardo, for your remarks. Now I would like to share some opening remarks from Mr. Emanuele Riva, INetQI Chair, who was unfortunately unable to grace us with his online presence, but was also kind enough to share a video.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you. It's a pleasure to be here to launch this Quality Infrastructure for Sustainable Development Index. It's a challenge that we are facing. We have to manage data. Data is as we say, the new gold in the new generation. Data are important because with this data we can demonstrate what we are here for, which is the value of our industries. So the benefit of accreditation and conformity assessment activities. Without data, we cannot demonstrate this. So we have also already some analytics worldwide that really demonstrates what is the value of accreditation. The other point is the data are important to understand the trends, to understand if in this period it's more important, more relevant to go to environment or to care to safety or for food industries and so on. So it's important to understand the trends. So also in this regards, data are useful. The other point is that data can help the regulator, provide information for regulators to take their decision. With this infrastructure, with this kind of index, it's possible to understand if the politics developed at a regional level, a national level, are effective and well implemented. So I'm really happy of this initiative, and IF and globally INetQI is in favor to have this kind of tools for our industry. Regarding INetQI, I'd like to highlight one aspect that we are trying to push in this moment is to enforce also regional infrastructure. We know that there is the international, the INetQI is the national network. I think it's important also to focus on regional infrastructure. There are already some experience in some continents, but I think it's more important to have this stable, to have this recognized, to have an effective participation at each level. So also this index could be useful to understand the trends at the regional level. So the regional approach could be very beneficial to enforce the quality infrastructure strategy. Which is the strategy? The index now it takes inspiration from Planet and prosperity. We are using many words in this period. We can use decarbonization, digitalization, decentralization, or other social, environment, economical. So there are many ways to express the same concept. The concept is that we are going to sustainable developments. We are trying to drive our industry in this direction. So in this regard, I happy to confirm that IF is about to launch a new working group for sustainability. We will have the first meeting in the 5th of June, and we will have the involvement of the main stakeholder, of course, for IF, accreditation bodies and conformity assessment activities, users, but also we will have external members. Can make a couple of words. For example, we have United Nations, we will have WWF, we will have World Bank. So many important ISO, ILAC, so many important institutions will be with us to think what is needed now to implement the sustainable goals. So we are in a moment that we have to move from the words to the fact. So the goal of this working group will be to have an impact, try to have a pragmatic approach, to understand, looking face to face, what is really needed in our community to make this change. So to pass from big and nice discussion to really concrete movement in industries. In relation to this also, there is a connection to this also, the database of IF. We think that we cannot leave sustainability only to abstract concept. We need evidence, we need proof that the company is going in the right direction. So the database is essential to understand if a company is really going in the direction of sustainability. It's important this also because there are many financial institutions that are relying on sustainable index. So, and if you are going to implement this sustainable index in financial, it's essential that these data are correct and are validated. So a database is there to validate that really the company that is declaring to be sustainable can prove to be sustainable. So the IF database, I think, is there in the really connected to the sustainability goal of IF in our community. And another last topic we would like to think about also what IF is doing with ILAC. We are working through a new one organization, and the main goal of this is to have a major impact in international arena. So at the end, we can see that everything is consistent. So the possible merging or fusion with ILAC, the database, the index that are now is going on this regard. So there are many elements. Also the quality infrastructure at regional level. There are many aspects that are going the same direction. The main goal of all of us in this period is to go forward to the sustainable goals. So I hope that this initiative will have a good success and will be something useful for our community to do the right thing. Thank you.
Those were some interventions from Mr. Emanuele Riva, INetQI Chair. Thanks very much for them. Now over to our expert, Ms. Hedvig Norland, to share key results and insights of the QI4SD Index, followed by a brief demonstration of the index website.
So putting up this. So yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Hedvig Norlin, and I'm very delighted today to give you a brief description of how we built the index, the methodology, and I will also give you some key results and insights to this index. 94%, this is a percentage of countries that replied to a dedicated UNIDO ISO survey that was launched last year. And those countries have adopted ISO 9001 international legislation. ISO 9001 is probably one of the most common, the most recognized standards in the world for quality management systems for companies and organizations. And even for a non-expert in the QI field, this standard surely rings a bell in my head. This is just one out of many interesting results coming from the survey and from this index project that I will talk about a bit later. But before I start, I'd just like to say that there were 92 countries that replied to this survey, so that the percentage of 94% has a meaning. So let's start with the objective of this index has been to measure the readiness and contribution of quality infrastructure to sustainable development goals using a composite indicator approach. Because quality infrastructure is indeed a multidimensional concept. We can't just use one single measurement to assess it. We need many. Since the QI, quality infrastructure, comprises many domains as accreditation, conformity assessments, market surveillance, metrology, quality policy, and standards. And this index aims to measure QI by using indicators for all these QI domains, which are then afterwards aggregated into a composite indicator, a single aggregate score for each country. And then, moreover, we also have the index gives scores for the three main pillars of sustainable development, namely people, planet, and prosperity. And these scores measure the contribution and readiness of a country to tackle this sustainable development in this specific pillar. And here we see the division, how the SDGs are divided into these pillars. We followed the recognized methodology to construct our composite indicator following the European Commission Joint Research Center and OECD Handbook on Composite Indicators, where we started with a literature review under the UNIDO consultation. And as you know, there are not many tools for assessing quality infrastructure so far. And there is no database, a centralized database where you can find all these statistics on QI. So this is a bit of a challenge to construct an indicator, a composite indicator. So we first drafted this conceptual framework with the first pool of initial indicators. Then we had the first round of a consultation with the experts from the INetQI organizations, where they were screening all the indicators. And we had the data collection, where most of the data were provided through these INetQI organizations. Where the data was lacking, we launched, UNIDO launches a survey together with ISO to get the data on quality policy and also about adopted standards. Then the indicators were screened, where we had some criteria for relevance, value added, and also data valuability. And we did the statistical analysis to construct our indicator, where we had the data treatment, normalization, aggregating, weighting. So we weighted our indicators into the first version of the index. Then last autumn, we had our validation, a reality check in form of this validation workshop with the experts from the INetQI organizations. So this was the second round of consultation, where all the indicators were scrutinized and checked, and the methodology was then adapted with their help, and some new additional indicators were inserted to the framework. So, we ended with the final indicator set of 36 indicators, and here we are to present the index. The conceptual framework consists of 5 QI dimensions: accreditation, conformity assessment, standards, metrology, and policy. And in 4 dimensions, we were able to map indicators to the SDGs, to these 3 Ps. So these are our P indicators that measure the intersections between the SDGs and the QI dimensions. Here we can take, for example, an indicator about adopted a different environmental standard, for example, while some indicators we define as the general indicators, which they measure QI, and they are of course important for SDG development, but there is no explicit link to SDGs where we can't map it to the SDGs. For example, that would be the membership of an international QI organization. So this means that actually we not only have we have the general index, but we also have the 3 P indexes, meaning that we have 4 indexes in total. These are the 36 general indicators in our framework, in our 5 dimensions, where we have calculated the index for 137 countries, selected based on data availability criteria. So for a subset, we were able to map them to the 3 Ps. So these are 9 indicators for the people, planet, and prosperity indices. And then coming to some key results. The first is here a map showing the general scores, the general QI4SD scores for all 137 countries. And the bluer countries, the higher the score. You can see the bar, the strip chart at the bottom where you see the interval of all the scores going from 0 to 100. And here we see that actually, yes, beggar economies do have higher QI scores. And this is true for all QI, for all dimensions apart from the policy dimension. And we can here we see the blue. We will come back to it later, but Germany, the United States, and China do have very high scores in the index. But Germany is the one with the strongest QI, also for the general, but also for the 3 P indices. But instead of only looking at all the countries together, it makes more sense to put them in comparable groups. And this B-swarm plot shows the peer groups of countries based on their GDP values. Here we have grouped the economies into 4 GDP groups. So we have the economies from the large economies, Excel, large to medium to the smallest. So here we see in the Excel group to the very left, where we have Germany as with the highest score, and here we have also the group median of that. The bar here shows the medium of that, and then for the large group we have Netherlands and their group members, and then we have medium and the small group. The next slide, I will continue with the GDP. And here we have a plot which shows the relationship of our general QI4SD Index scores on the y-axis versus GDP on our x-axis. And yes, we see that there is a strong linear association, and there is a high correlation between the values. And high index values do occur in the countries with high GDP values. But since this is not given, of course, a whole picture, because they're not following the straight line, of course. We have a set of countries, and they are marked in blue here, and we call them the QI overperformers, because looking at the residuals, they do score much higher in QI than compared to respect to their GDP. And these QI overperformers are mainly situated in Europe, while we have a group in red where they are underperforming in what we could say in QI compared to the GDP, and they are mainly concentrated in the middle range here of the GDP scale. But taking two countries, take for example Austria and Nigeria, they do have very similar GDP levels, but they are very diverse QI4SD Index scores. So of course not, the economic level is not the only enabler of an advanced QI system of a country. Then with the survey that was launched last year to get the data for this quality policy dimension, it was seen, we saw from that actually a majority of countries has a national or regional quality policy, that is a policy for developing and sustaining quality infrastructure. And 30% of the countries that replied to the survey, they do have regulations or directives that define different functions of QI areas, which is a lot. And the survey also showed that actually smaller economies can have a very high QP score in this dimension, compared to the other QI dimensions. And the plot here gives some, the bar plot here gives some of the different indicators for this dimension. But there is actually one indicator that is striking out a little bit, and that is the last one, where we show actually that only 90% of the countries, surveyed countries, have considered gender balance in the quality policy process. And only, again, just looking at the panelists, there is actually, yes, there are a few women in the speakers, and the SDG 5 should be really carefully considered in the future for quality infrastructure. This is the first part that I would like to. I don't know now, nor if I should continue directly with the.
Yeah, I can also. You can continue, and if you have any issues, I can step in.
Yes, yes. So here I'm going to show you some results from this web portal, which you can find under the UNIDO Knowledge Hub. Here we have the address. And Nora, I will stop sharing my screen, and you can, if it's fine, that you turn on the video, and I will guide through the website. Is that fine?
This is fine.
So here, yes, so under the UNIDO Knowledge Hub, we have this website where the first one is giving an overview of all the results. And here we can scroll over all the countries where we see the country scores, and also countries which do not have data. And then if we click on a country, we come to the country profile. And yes, so we can go back, we scroll, this is the first page, and we go down, and here we have the peer groups that we looked at just before, and we can see what countries in each of these B swarm cuts is. We can also look at the income from the World Bank income, all the World Bank regions we have here. You can scroll, and then there are other regional groupings that are of interest to UNIDO and other organizations. Here we have the snapshot of the 5 dimensions, and here we also have the 3P indices and overview. So this is the first page, and now we can go to the QI dimension page, which shows as well, we can, there are explanations of the different dimensions. We have an overview of all the countries with the values, And here we can also filter. So we have the different GDP groups. We can have the World Bank income groups, or we can also take the regional groups. So here we are in, and also we can explore the different dimensions to see the rankings here in the South Asia region, and for all the 5 dimensions. And then going to the 3P, the SDG indices. Here we have again the overview of the 3P indices, where we have the 4 dimensions. You can click on them, and then we see all the values. And here we can again do the filtering for, here we have all the countries, for the people and the planet, and the prosperity index. Here we can select a country and come to the country profile, where we have a sheet where we see all the results. And again, we can filter by taking what group it belongs to, the GDP group or income group. Also the World Bank regions. Here you can click to see all the other countries, all are. Yeah, so, and here also all the indicators are also listed. So within each dimension, we see what indicators and how the country is doing. So for all indicators for all countries. And again, you can search, here we search for Spain. We want the country profile for Spain, and we see how Spain is doing in the world. And here we can also do United Kingdom. We are coming to, here we have the profile for United Kingdom. And then we have also an information page, a little bit about the methodology, all the indicators. And here we are also able to download the data and download the reports which accompany this index. So here I finish this whole, the web portal.
Great. Thank you very much, Hedvig, for telling us a little bit about the data and the methodology behind the index, and also giving us a glimpse of the QI4SD Index website. Okay, thank you very much to all our speakers for the first part. Now let's move on to the second part of this session, which is the panel discussion, and it will be moderated by Mr. Juan Pablo Davila of UNIDO.
Thank you, Nora. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with all these experts that have contributed to the development of this Quality Infrastructure for Sustainable Development Index. We have been working in this for months, I would say. We had the data analysis that it was explained by Hedvig, several meetings. We retrieved the data from the databases of these organizations. So from BIPM, from EIF, from ISO, from EIC, it is data that is retrieved, but it's collected by the partner organizations, and then we compile that data to form the index. I think it is very important to highlight, and the big contributions that we had with the INetQI community. Now we have heard the different results of the index that we have. Of course, this is just a snapshot, as it was mentioned. There's a full report on the website, and then everyone is invited to visit the website of the index and browse and explore their country, their comparisons, etc. Now the panel, as mentioned, we were a group of different organizations that looking at the different indexes or different data that we have to see how we can come up with a common index and agreed index. And sustainable development is the word of the decade, I would say, or if not, it's more than a decade, because we have the strategy 2030, where all countries have agreed to improve in the different indicators. So we have 17 indicators. It's worth mentioning that these 17 goals, It's worth mentioning that these 70 goals have different sub indicators. We have about 169 sub indicators, and then that disaggregates more into really targeted areas, about 231 points that the SDGs measure. So it's a complex objective to follow. It's more than just the 17 SDGs. And as it was mentioned, we try to cluster it into people, planet, and prosperity. And there are two goals there, which is peace and prosperity, partnership. And I would like to highlight the partnership part because this is a good example of the partnership that we are working towards that indicator. As quality infrastructure institutions, we're partnering to provide global tool, which is this index. Having said that, we have the different organizations joining that have their own contributions, their own mandates to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. It's not only reduced to providing the data, and we would like to know more about what are these mandates of each of the institutions contributing to sustainable development in general. And that would be a first question that I will ask to our panelists. The second part of the question is, how does your organization aggregate the indicators on your domain into people, prosperity, and planet? We've seen that it was briefly explained that if we look at ISO 9001, it would be difficult to really link it to one indicator, one goal, or one indicator, whether it's people, prosperity, or planet. So these are two questions that we would like to ask to our panel presenters. What does your organization mandate contribute to sustainable development, and how do you cluster those indicators? I mean, in legal metrology, in standards, into people, prosperity, and planet. And let me begin with the metrology institutions that have participated. Cengiz from the BIPM, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan Pablo. Hello, everyone. Colleagues, as you are all aware, metrology as one of the important pillars of the quality infrastructure plays a key role in the coordinated actions of the United Nations. We all believe that indicators of each sustainable development goal are shaped by input from measurement data, which is underpinned by a framework for metrologically traceable measurements. The BIPM, together with the National Metrology Institutes and in collaboration with the regional metrology organizations, establishes this framework and ensures comparability of measurements around the world. So that means that the measurements performed at the National Metrology Institutes are metrologically traceable to the international system of units, and these measurements are accurate, stable, comparable, and coherent to underpin economy, society, and citizens. So our work, in simplest term, our work and that of the NMIs in turn supports all the measurements undertaken in laboratories and industry. Colleagues, it is evident measurements across all sectors and aspects of human endeavor. There are indeed many examples of applications of measurements in social challenges. So if I can give few examples, for example, measurements in thermometry play a vital role in a sustainable society, such as monitoring global warming, energy saving, manufacturing and the fair trade, as well as health and the safety and the research. Another example can be from chemistry metrology. So chemistry metrology is almost supporting all sustainable development goals like zero hunger, good health and well-being, and so on. So, however, if we look at the direct application of chemical metrology in addressing social challenges, then we can identify healthcare and the environmental monitoring. So that is the contribution from the BIPM.
Thank you, Cengiz. Let's move with our other metrology, legal metrology organization. Ian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the participants. Yes, I'd just like to follow on from what Cengiz has just said, in that metrology underpins all the elements of quality infrastructure, because you can't demonstrate compliance with a standard without having accurate and traceable test results. You need those results to make products which are which meet market needs and are usable across the world. The OML in legal metrology is not responsible for the measurements themselves. We're responsible for trying to harmonize measurements which are regulated by governments. Now, traditionally, that regulation has been in the area of trade. So that addresses the prosperity group of the Sustainable Development Goals. But increasingly, governments are regulating other areas of measurement. Health measurements, already been mentioned by Cengiz, environmental pollution measurements, and so on. So there are very specific SDGs which are addressed: health, energy measurement, pollution, and so on. You can begin to see that the metrology does affect everyone in their own daily lives, not just from trade, but from these other areas of health and pollution and so on. But having said that, there is also a people aspect to much of this, in that by regulating instruments which are used in trade, that has a direct effect on the fairness of trade at all levels, from the very simplest market in a developing country to supermarkets that operate on a global basis. So by ensuring that there is a level playing field across that basis for trade, that is how metrology can assist in relieving poverty in countries, to make sure that people receive the right amount of goods for their money, but also that farmers, even subsistence farmers, are managing to get the right income for the products which they're producing. So in particular, it's very important from our point of view that legal metrology contributes to the quality infrastructure by providing that legislative framework. As far as the organization grouping its work, addressing directly the SDGs in its work, we currently try to look at the implementation of the models for legislation which we produce, but more grouped on the basis of their technical fields of measurement, whether that's a mass measurement, a volume measurement, a temperature measurement, or so on. But this index is going to be very important for us in looking at grouping those in a different way, so that things are more perhaps harmonized with the way that other organizations internationally are looking at their output. So I think that the index and its measurements are going to be a very important aspect of our future work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Cengiz. I think it's really important, the work that was done for the index, as to see, okay, what is the impact of a certain measurement toward the different SDGs. To put an example, there's SDG 14, which is the life underwater. And as I said, the different SDGs, the goals have different targets, and these targets have indicators. One of the targets of this SDG is to minimize the effects of acidity in the oceans. And the indicator for that is that the media acidity measurement of pH should be reduced. Now, how do we get to that indicator if we cannot measure properly? But now, coming back to our other panelists, the standards organizations that we have here, ISO, IEC, how does your organization contribute to sustainable development? I will give the floor to ISO to enlighten us and explain us what is the role of ISO in sustainable development, and how do you cluster the different standards? I don't know how many standards you have all around the world. We have heard about 9001, but how do you cluster these different standards in the work into people, prosperity, and planet? Jose, please.
Yep. Thank you, Juan Pablo. It's an honor to be here today in this important launch, and hello everybody from all over the world. So yes, indeed, ISO has a long-standing commitment to sustainable development, and that goes from flagship standards like ISO 26000 on social responsibility to having over 350 technical committees that work on the different pillars of sustainable development. And also then from there, we look at horizontal activities like the free ISO Guide 82, which is sustainability guidance for standard writers. Then we committed from the UN SDGs, and we did a mapping of our standards. We have currently a collection of over 24,000 standards, and we have mapped the recent ones, which are in excess of 17,000, and we have a tool to help our members to carry out that work. Then that's at base level, but we also have transversal initiatives like strategic advisory groups on ESG, smart farming, etc. And but the pinnacle of all is actually the ISO Strategy 2030, which has sustainability embedded into all its elements. So sustainability is also reflected in the fact that ISO created recently a department specialized in sustainability to amalgamate and put together under a program all these different initiatives. Like we look, for instance, at the General Assembly last year, we signed the London Declaration, which is ISO's commitment to climate action. We have a gender action plan for 2025, a young professionals program, and various activities under this sustainability program that was approved recently by the ISO Council. So you can see that at all these levels, we are working on sustainability very seriously. How does ISO cluster or aggregate QI indicators into people, prosperity, and planet? Well, let's not forget that we operate a decentralized system with 167 countries that are members of ISO, and we operate a bottom-up approach. That means that each country will provide the global needs in terms of standards and submit them to ISO. So what we try to do is provide them with the tools to look at those three elements, the three Ps, and for that we also supplement it with the tools like and the strategic advisory groups. The mapping tool is, as I mentioned earlier, quite important, and the guidance for the standard writers. But we also look at the ISO capacity building department that has a program for working with the developing countries. And in this instance, the tool will be very useful for providing the intervention on those programs and how they measure progress in their successful path towards meeting the sustainable development goals. So two approaches, top-down and bottom-up approaches to help there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. David, the IEC, how does the organization contribute to sustainable development? And the second part is the clustering of your standards into these three Ps. Over to you.
So thank you very much, Juan Pablo, and good day to everybody. And thank you for the invitation to participate today in the launching of this Quality Infrastructure for Sustainable Development Index. Of course, IEC has been involved in this initiative from the beginning, and probably because we are one of the founding members of the INetQI, but also because the IEC is one of the key players in international quality infrastructure, because we are involved in two aspects of that, which is the standard side and the conformity assessment side. As we've heard earlier, the main underpinnings of any quality infrastructure are the standards and the metrological side. IEC develops international standards, and then in a quality infrastructure, countries adopt those standards. Then they use their metrological organization so that we have the two. We have on standards, we have the requirements that are necessary for any sort of product or service. And then we have on the metrology side, we have the measurement side. So we have the requirements and the measurements. And conformity assessment is where those two things come together, where we check the requirements using measurement to achieve to determine if the products and services have actually met the required standards. And of course, those standards, those requirements are based on national policy to achieve national goals. And that's what, in the essence, what a quality infrastructure is all about. Of course, as I say, IC is involved in both the international standards development and international conformity assessment. So standards set requirements for goods and services, and conformity assessment checks those requirements, checks that those requirements have actually been achieved. So standards and conformity assessment together create a leveraging effect for sustainable development by ensuring that minimum acceptable standards have actually been achieved. Now, in terms of what the IEC is doing to cluster or to aggregate the QI indicators into people, prosperity, and planet, IEC has a web page dedicated to the UN SDGs. And on this web page, there is a summary of all the IEC standards that contribute to the achievement of the SDGs. So this mapping has been done in the same way that it's been done at ISO. And it's also possible to do a deep dive within those web pages on each of the individual UN SDGs and go deeper and understand how each standard, the list of standards for a particular SDG and how they contribute to achieving that SDG. So IC has mapped its standards to the 17 UN SDGs. However, it has not done a clustering or aggregation to people, prosperity, and planet. Once the UN does that using the 17 standards and maps them itself to the prosperity, people, and planet, then our system would follow naturally that aggregation at the UN level. So that's how the IC aggregates, and that's part of the contribution that the IC makes to the UN SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Indeed, the level of granularity of how we can map these standards or metrological capabilities to each of SDGs was a big discussion during the development of the index, because that it was the starting base, the base to start, and how do we can align along those identifications the rest of the conformity assessment, accreditation, and all the quality infrastructure, because it was a discussion. I remember that we were mapping with the different organizations with the help of the experts from these organizations. How do we map those standards to the SDGs? And while some have a lot of granularity, I think there's a lot to still refine on that. But I think that was a great start on the granularity. I remember a lot the discussions with the BIPM on how to do. Before coming back to BIPM, I would like to have the views of Brahim from the accreditation part.
Thank you, Juan Pablo, and hello everyone from around the world. It's a big pleasure to be with you today. As you know, the community of accreditation bodies and accredited conformity assessment bodies around the world, represented by ILAC and AF, they are committed to sustainable development goals at the highest level, and that's very clear in our mission. And in the statement of the mission, we state that we facilitate sustainable development as one of our mission objectives, and that's through the mutual recognition arrangement that are established between the different accreditation bodies around the world, aiming to facilitate trade and helping prosperity. Second, to protect the environment, and that's for the planet, and third, to protect the consumers, and that's for the people. So since 2 years now, we have been putting this sustainable development as our high priority, and that's also from the structural level, where, as mentioned, Emanuele, today we have a working group for sustainable development that joins different partners or different stakeholders around the world to work together on establishing sustainable development. And we did also, for the second year now, have the World Accreditation Day theme around sustainable development. Last year, it was about how accreditation helps in the implementation of sustainable development. And this year was about how accreditation helps in sustainable development in economic growth and the environment. And during these years, we have worked on gathering evidence on how accreditation and accredited conformity assessment activities really support the sustainable development through different case studies from around the world. So we have around 600 case studies that are gathered in our websites, and I have the website now in the chat. So if you'd like to consult the website, you will find that there are a lot of case studies that you can select by country. You can go and search in your economy what kind of case studies they exist. But most importantly, you can go and select the SDG, and then you find the different case studies on how accreditation, conformity assessment, different regulations referring to accreditation, accredited conformity assessment and MRAs, they support that specific SDG. In addition to that, in IAF, we started now putting what is the most important component of having sustainable development is having data that can help you to work on the different axes of sustainable development, and that's the database of IAF. So IAF is having a database working on having all the management system certificates that support the environment, support the quality system, support the protection of consumers, and also the different trade activities, so that people can have open data and they search for different certificates. Hopefully we can achieve the 1.6 million certificates in the database. So Juan Pablo, as you know, sustainable development is about fulfilling the needs of today, but also enabling the future generations to also achieve their goals. And that's very important. And this is what accreditation and mutual recognition is about. So when we establish a sustainable quality infrastructure, we don't only serve ourselves today, but we allow our children in the future to be able to have a brighter future. Thank you, Juan Pablo.
Thank you, Brahim, for those reminder of sustainable development. I think we cannot disagree in any. Cengiz, back to you on the how does metrology, because it was a big effort during the development of the index. How do you cluster the the metrology capabilities into SDGs or into the 3 Ps?
Okay, thank you, Juan Pablo. Colleagues, it is indeed quite challenging to aggregate QI indicators in metrology into people, prosperity, and the planet precisely, because much of the metrology work is synergetic. However, there is a database. So the BIPM maintains the internationally recognized database of the mutual recognition arrangement, CIPM array. So the database is called KCDB database. And as you are all familiar with the ISO 7025 and in the ISO 7020, ISO IC 7025, the KCDB and the CIPM array is given as a reliable source for metrological traceability. So this database is maintained by the BIPM. So the NMIs through participation in the CIPM array, so they demonstrate the equivalence of their measurement standards, and they generate CMCs that underpin measurements. So CMCs are the calibration and measurement capabilities. So as of today, the KCDB, key comparison database, contains more than 25,000 measurement data declared by the NMIs. So, and this data is arranged by 9 subject fields defined by the International Committee for Weights and Measures. So these 9 metrology areas such as acoustic, ultrasound and vibration, electricity and magnetism, mass and related quantities, and so on. So if we take these metrology areas, so as general physics, for example, acoustic and vibration, electricity, magnetism, lengths, mass and thermometry, time and frequency, for example. So the CMCs in general physics are considered to contribute to the prosperity. So as the starting point in any given country is invariably supporting industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So we can conclude that if any country has any CMCs on the KCDB, it will be considered for prosperity. For the planet and the people, we understood that these clusters are highly supported by chemistry, meteorology, and ionizing radiation measurements. However, we should recognize that some of the activities of these meteorology areas also contribute to prosperity. In order to better understand, it is important to look at each meteorology areas and subfields of these meteorology areas. Of course, you need to question yourself which calibration measurement capabilities would predominantly be contributing to which sustainable development goals. So this is how do we cluster and aggregate QI indicators in meteorology for 3 Ps.
Thank you, Cengiz. I think all presenters have mentioned data, getting data, and as in the opening remarks of Emanuele, data is the new gold. And the index is all about data. Without data, we could not have constructed an index. And without reliable data, the trust of the index and the results will be, without that, will be questionable. There's a need for reliable data at different levels of the quality infrastructure. What do you think from your organizations are the challenges for data collection in the future, as looking into how can we continue this effort of having an index that we can trust the data, that the data can serve the different levels, because we're not only looking at the data and the results can serve a country, can serve a region. You see the website can aggregate how's the level of quality infrastructure in different regions, but also support organizations like our organizations, that we get together with the international community. We need to have a look at the international, how internationally we're doing. Not only those responsible of quality infrastructure directly, but also UN organizations as UNIDO, were are mandated to support industrialization, industrial development. What are the challenges for data collection in the future? I think that's a key question, and how to gather that. I'll start with our last intervenant, Brahim. I would just ask to be a bit short because we're running out of time. Thank you, Brahim. To you.
Yes, Juan Pablo, no problem. I think one of the enablers of quality infrastructure is the digitalization, and that in the future, the pace the quality infrastructure is going to develop will be faster and faster. So collecting the data will be a challenge because of different levels of digitalizations around the world. Some people will be available to provide you the data every month, every day, and other places in the world will be once a year or once in 2 years. And that will be a challenging point for data gathering that is important to take in consideration, in my point of view.
Thank you. To the previous, David, your views on data gathering?
Yes, so the data that the IEC has contributed to the index is things like the membership to the IEC and the affiliation with the IEC. There is from those members and affiliates who has adopted standards and how many standards they have adopted, and also membership in our IEC conformity assessment systems and recognition of the CA systems results, the test reports and the certificates, etc. So some of this data can be collected automatically, but some must be collected manually and some only through surveys. So keeping the entire collection of data up to date is quite a challenge. And I would also ask the question, does it make sense to have daily information about this? I imagine countries and their situation take time to evolve. And the question is, can also be asked, if we have data that will be updated over long periods of time, and others that will be updated very quickly, will that create any kinds of bias in the index itself? So those are maybe issues to look at going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Completely agree. The gathering of the data or the freshness of the data may vary from organization to organization, and of course, the elements we can gather data, as this is data that can serve different levels. It should be in a range organized level who gathers what data, and not to duplicate and avoid a centralized, completely centralized system. Jose, your views on the data?
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge for us at ISO. It's not something that we have traditionally looked at. First of all, the main challenge is to define what data we need to collect and what's the use and purpose. Then collecting the data itself is also a challenge, and it will be as the collection of standards is growing and growing. But also the methodology that we will be using to identify the elements of that data. So we started doing now data mining because we use all our content through the XML publishing processes. And we also commissioned research to different organizations to analyze the results afterwards. So I think that in summary, the future challenge will be identifying evolving needs on what we need to measure and track, and also the tools that we will be using for those purposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. On the legal metrology perspective, what's the angle, Ian?
Well, very similar, in fact, to those interventions that already happened. There is a huge amount of data to do with legal metrology out there, but most of it is only recovered on the basis of surveys, or is very differently organized within our individual member states. But it goes at a very wide range from the documentary information, the regulations available in each country, our international requirements being implemented in those countries, right down to certification for individual instruments, test results for individual instruments, and so on, and programming when instruments need to be re-verified and all these kind of things. And we are also heavily investing in the area of digitalization going into the future, so that hopefully a lot of these things will be done in a more harmonized way between different countries, and also more automatically, so that we really don't have to go out there and manually seek the information and then collate that information afterwards. Just one point which I forgot to say earlier on, to do with the link into the SDGs. Since the subject of gender came up and it hasn't been addressed so far, if I may just quickly mention that as one of the half a dozen men representatives on of the international organizations. It is a difficult subject, and from the OML's point of view, there are really two aspects to that. One is, yes, I'm a man on this group, mainly because those in legal metrology tend to be engineers, and historically not so many women have gone into engineering. Therefore, it's very difficult for us to magic up women to be participants in the OML's work or any other legal metrology work at a national level. Hopefully, with the increased drive, this will result in more women being involved in technology, engineering, and so on. And even though legal metrology is a very niche peculiarity of the engineering field, hopefully in the future that will improve. However, the work which we do does have a very large effect on women, especially I would say in more developing countries where there is the women are the ones that are probably more affected by the improvements in basic trade within markets and shops, both as market holders and as customers within those markets, and also with the improvements in basic health measurements and so on. So just as a comment on the gender issue, since it hadn't been brought up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I see David has his hand out. Just let's hear you, David, before we finalize this round with Cengiz.
Okay, very quickly. I just wanted to say that wanted to add that one of the issues in data is, for example, with the IC, and I imagine ISO has the same sort of issue. When we map our standards to the SDGs, they're either mapped in or they're mapped out. And the question is, how much can they be mapped in? How much should they be mapped out? And just an example, for example, for SDG 2, which is zero hunger, strengthening the cold chain, which is sort of the post-harvest slaughtering and cold chain, would strengthen or would reduce food waste and greenhouse gas emissions. But to do this needs technology. So it needs refrigerators, lighting, clean water, electricity, generation electricity, access, and so on. And so, and the IC, of course, has standards to cover all of these components. However, the IC also has standards to cover electric fences for cattle, for keeping cattle corralled. Do electric fences contribute to zero hunger? That's a more tenuous rationale. And so behind the data, there are these sorts of questions, these sorts of this rationale that is going on. And depending on whose rationale we use, things can be in, things can be out. So that can also affect the data. That's just one little example on the standard side.
Thank you, David. Indeed. To finalize this round, Cengiz, you introduced the KCDB. Your angle on data gathering.
Okay, so the data on the KCDB is publicly available, and the countries participating in the activities of the BIPM and wishing to evaluate their meteorology infrastructure as to whether their meteorology system is supporting social challenges, so they can extract the data from the KCDB and make their own analysis. So what I would like to mention is last year we launched an application programming interface, which is called API for the KCDB. So this allows automated searching for CMCs in the KCDB. So this is just the first step in what is a revolution in data science. And so the aim is to make the data what we call fair. So that is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. As for the sustainability of the data in the KCDB, I would indicate that the measurement data in the KCDB is frequently evaluated and confirmed. And as of today, countries participating in the BIPM activities cover 98% of the world GDP. So we don't expect huge changes in the KCDB. The data in the KCDB remain stable.
Thank you, Cengiz. I would like to remind the audience, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A chat. We'll see if we have some time to respond. If not, we will be posting these questions in our website in the Knowledge Hub with the responses if they're not responded during this session. I see that we're running out of time. We talk about the data, we talk about the availability of data, the freshness of the data. As this is a first international exercise to have a composite index. In very 2 or 3 words, how frequent do you think the index should be updated, considering what we have discussed? Cengiz, please.
Yeah, I have actually indicated already that the data on the KCDB remains stable and sustainable because the countries participating in the BIPM activities cover 98% of the world GDP, and all of them have, almost all of them have CMCs in the KCDB. And the data in the KCDB evaluated sometimes, and they are confirmed. And we may have some small CMCs adding, but in most cases, they are refreshing the existing CMCs.
Thank you. This means that we can come to the KCDB and you have the fresh data when yes, exactly. We decided to. Yes.
You can extract the data from the
we can
CDB.
extract.
Yes.
David, your views, how often we should be developing revising or updating the index?
So, well, that again depends on the availability of data. Some data will take a while to be accumulated, may come from surveys, a lot of manual work. Other data will be real time. It will be available at every instant because it can be obtained automatically through various systems. But you know, what is really needed? We can say that national quality infrastructures take time to develop and take time to evolve. Does it make sense to do this every week or every month or every year? Or is once every 3 years a better option? So, you know, I leave that as a question to the group. Thank you.
I think that's precisely the question, how often we should, considering these issues or limitations of the data. Brahim, your
yes, I think yeah, Juan Pablo, I think that we have to see also the perspective of the user. This index is supposed to be used by regulators, investors, support programs, and usually the international other indexes they use for trade is once a year. So maybe once a year will be a good start point, and then we see how we progress.
Thank you. Jose?
Well, I have to agree with David. I think that there are elements that could be updated on an annual basis, as Brahim mentioned as well. But on the standard side for ISO, we review standards every 5 years in that cycle to ensure that they maintain that accuracy and up-to-date information. So from our perspective, that information wouldn't change so much every other year. So I would stick to those two elements of it.
Thank you. Ian, just to finalize.
Just to finalize, I agree with what has already been said, that I think that given the target of this aimed at people making decisions on policy and so on, those are things that don't change every day. Good starting point. Of course, going into the future with increased digitalization, maybe all this information can be immediately updated and so on. But partly in response to one of the questions which was put down, of course, there will be a big disparity between the data that can be recovered from different sovereign states with totally different political systems and different data collection systems. So for a very long time, that's not going to be something that's done in a consistent way across the world. Thanks.
Thank you. I think that's a topic to further discuss on how often we want it is to do, not only us, but looking at our clients and who is using the data. With that, we have come to the end of this session. We are really, really proud to be at this point, not that we are ending this session, but that we managed to launch with the collaboration of all the institutions that have worked hardly with the panelists that are here, the teams behind the panelists as well. It has taken us a lot of time, and we strongly believe in the African say that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I think this is an example that we're being together, SDG 17 partnerships again, and together with INetQI, in particular with the institutions that are here present, we have come far, but this far, it is not enough. As it was said, it is only a milestone in a long road towards a better, sustainable and fairer world. And I think this is a milestone to celebrate, and also a milestone to build awareness on the countries, the data of the countries and the regions, and how can these countries and the institutions at the different levels can improve. It is very important to see how we can measure the progress of the SDGs. How can we say that in the future that we have made progress? We can't say that we have hit the targets if we cannot measure accurately and precisely, and quality infrastructure is behind this accuracy in many ways and this precision. One takeaway that I see is that quality infrastructure provides the confidence that the measurement of progress towards the SDG are accurate. So provides the accuracy of those indicators. We talk about 17 indicators, about 170 targets. Sorry, I'm mixing again. 17 goals, 170 targets, and 231 indicators. If we don't have the fit for purpose quality infrastructure, we will not be able to measure those indicators. As I mentioned, this is a call for action to all the institutions and governments involved in quality infrastructure and realize the importance and the impact that quality infrastructure has towards achieving the SDGs. Lastly, I want to highlight that UNIDO and the partner organizations are INetQI. We are mandated to support the development of quality infrastructure globally, not to support a country itself, but to support collectively the quality infrastructure. And this index is a tool to measure ourselves, how well are we going, and how bad we're going. We want to see those vertical bars that were presented on how the world is moving towards a better fit for purpose quality infrastructure to achieve the sustainable development goals. So in the future, we can proudly say that we're better than today and we're much better than yesterday. So with that, thank you very much for your participation. I see Bernardo has joined. I will leave the last words to Bernardo, our managing director.
No, I was around. Thank you so much for this excellent discussion. I think what remains is a big clap for everybody. We are celebrating this important moment. Thank you so much. Thank you for the attendees, and thank you for the interpreters. So we let them have a nice weekend to everybody. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.